Our next speaker is Audrey Gray. Audrey Gray grew up outside of Denver and then spent a decade in Austin, Texas, studying art and generally having a good time. Now she lives and creates in Colorado Springs, where she has her hands in the dirt and is close to the mountains and the sky. Now we have Audrey Gray presenting My Art, Start to Finish.
Hi, I'm here to talk to you about how I got here with my work and how I create my pieces. What it all comes down to for me is connection with the earth, something as tenuous and hard to find in our culture, and without which we are able to create enormous destruction to our environment without even thinking about it. I think there are various ways of rebuilding an honest connection with our planet, and the most straightforward for me is exemplified by my cousin Lindsay. She lives on a beautiful organic farm in the southwest corner of Colorado, where she produces food and flowers. She's about as close to the earth as you can get and needs to be a good steward in order to be successful. I have a family history of relatives living close to the earth. My maternal grandfather worked for the U.S. Geological Survey and spent his career in the field surveying land. He mapped much of Colorado, New Mexico, Wyoming, and Texas, including Yellowstone and Phantom Canyon. When he retired, he bought an RV and spent good portions of his retirement in these same wilderness areas. My father's family have ranched on the land here in Colorado for generations. This is a photo of my great uncle as I remember him, working, often on a horse, and happy doing it. His greatest responsibility was to the small patch of earth he lived and worked on, and it kept him intimately connected with the planet and its cycles. So my parents met in Fairplay in the 1970s. My father was already a potter, himself working with earth as a primary medium, and my mother had ditched Texas the moment she could to move to the mountains that she loved. I also just had to include this amazing family photo from when I was about 3 years old. This is a picture of my son. I don't have a picture of myself in this phase, but he's the perfect illustration of how I spent a good portion of my childhood making alchemical potions out of dirt, grass, seeds, and anything else I could find. He's currently specializing in mud soup. I was a child of the 80s, so I had a muddy wine cooler factory. By the time I went to Texas for college, I already knew I wanted to be an artist. Georgia O'Keeffe was my favorite painter, and I found out she had spent time teaching and painting in the Panhandle. Her watercolors of Palo Duro Canyon are stunning, and it's the second largest canyon in the country, so I decided to go visit the place. This is where I made the realization that instead of using store-bought pigments, which are often produced in a lab and which I had recently found out can be quite toxic, I could try to use real dirt. So I got some dirt, promptly realized that making oil paints requires hours and hours and hours of grinding, and decided to just skip that part entirely, mix it with acrylic, and smear it onto the canvas. Things were chunky and awkward at first. This guy is made of dirt that's about a half-inch thick, and it's very heavy. And you can't tell from the photo, but when you mix the acrylic in this way, there's a film of that plastic surface between you and the dirt, and it makes it feel a little artificial. The texture is cool, but it's absolutely impossible to dust. I started with a very dull color palette. I did some experimentation using mica and sticks with nice results, and I started doing some minor grinding and sifting to create a more velvety texture. I started slowly to find different and brighter colors in the various places I traveled, mostly Texas and Colorado and New Mexico. These pieces were made purely to explore my expanded color palette and get everything I could out of the various colors I had. I've always been nervous about drawing, and I did mostly abstract pieces that explored my medium without putting too much pressure on the parts of art I was uncomfortable with. I gradually started painting some abstract clouds, very stylized at first, then slowly pushing myself and forcing myself to actually draw real things. These paintings were a lot more time-consuming and complicated, but I started to have the realization that painting actual landscapes that I actually live in out of dirt from places I go to connects me to the earth in a much deeper and more intimate way. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my process, starting with getting my materials. I really prefer to get dirt from road cuts. These are already huge scars man has left in the landscape, so me moving another gallon doesn't feel so disruptive. When I use my colors, I remember where I got them and the experiences that led me to those places. I do process my dirt, grinding it to be relatively fine. I use a mortar and pestle, an old blender, a kitchen strainer, and finally a very fine sieve designed for ceramics glazes. This part is really fun and dirty, and combined with the lime green carpet in my studio, brings back my childhood as a kid who just loved to play in the dirt. This is what the camera roll on my phone looks like, about 2/3 clouds or mountains, and 1/3 my child figuring out what a selfie is. Usually when I fall in love with a cloud or the light on the mountain on a given day, I take dozens of pictures of it, then go back later and work out the best composition in my studio. And this is what my studio looks like when I'm working. I have jars of processed dirt, and when I get ready to use one, I dump some of it into the lid so I can scoop it out as needed with my fingers. I have my giant bucket of acrylic medium, paintbrushes, and then the photographs that I'm working from are posted on the wall for reference. I start by doing lines out of black coal dust. I paint a line of acrylic with a brush, then sprinkle coal dust on top before it can dry and shake off the extra. Then it is a matter of filling in the different sections. On the bottom left, you can see what it looks like when all the color is on, and then the final product on the right once everything is dry and I've removed all the excess dirt with a paintbrush. I made this painting for my uncle. I started with a photo he took of his favorite tree. Crows are very meaningful to him, so I put a black mica crow in it. I have yet to find blue pigments, so skies become fantastical sunset colors. This piece represents the most hours I've ever spent on a painting. This piece is a project I'm currently working on, painting 12 portraits of Pikes Peak. This sky is from last summer. The sunset was incredible and the clouds were huge and almost completely drowned out the mountain. This is a bit of a larger painting for me, and I painted the clouds in one session without stopping so that my medium wouldn't dry. And lastly, a painting of a recent thunderstorm up near Divide. A picture of the earth made out of the earth, with my favorite pink gathered from right here in Manitou Springs, yellow granite dust from Woodland Park, yellow clay from the eastern plains near my uncle's ranch, and coal dust from the land near my cousin's beautiful farm. Thank you.